our panelists. First of all, my name is Brian Wormerskirchen. I should introduce myself. Brian Wormerskirchen. I am the Secretary of the Student Senate, and I'll be moderating this evening. And our panelists include Representative Terry Morrow. He's in his third term in the Minnesota House, representing District 23A, which includes St. Peter, Gibbon, and is it North Mankato? North Mankato. He currently serves as Minority Whip and sits on the Agriculture and Rural Development Policy and Finance, Higher Education Policy and Finance, and Transportation Policy and Finance Committees. And Representative Morrow is a resident of St. Peter, lives in St. Peter, and is a professor in communications, correct? At Gustavus Adolphus in St. Peter. We also have Rich Neumeister, and Rich Neumeister is a true citizen lobbyist. He has been lobbying at the Minnesota legislature for over 30 years, advocate for individual privacy rights, open meeting rules, and governmental transparency. He's an example of how citizens can influence change at the state capitol when they are passionate about an issue. And our third guest this evening is Senator Roger Chamberlain. He's a first-term senator for Lino Lakes, representing District 53, which includes the cities of Shoreview, White Bear Lake, Circle Pines, and Lino Lakes. He serves as the vice chair of the Local Government and Elections Committee and sits on the Commerce and Consumer Protection, Education, and Taxes Committees. Senator Chamberlain is also an alumni of Metropolitan State University. So let's welcome our guest this evening. I'd like to start out by just allowing our panelists to just kind of give a brief introduction to maybe how you got involved in the political process, and Rich, in your case, how you got involved in lobbying, and why you stuck with it so long.
I guess I'll start first. Basically, I was a project kid. I was a low-income kid, lived here in St. Paul. Not born here, from California, and particularly people in the 60s and early 70s called public health. And so one of the things, living in the Down Housing Project, right off 35. When I was young, I started seeing the influence of government, everything the same, and all those kinds of things. Again, you know, as a kid, you wonder who, where, what, the community center, who's involved, who's knocking on my door, trying to do an inspection, my mom going crazy. Oh, we got someone from the central office coming to inspect our building, also being a firstborn does help too, for other boys. Because, you develop a little bit of independence, you get a little bit straight. So I've always had at least some interest in doing things. I think the involvement of government in my life, at least gave me a cause. Remember how you get interested in politics and history. I mean, I worked for the Humphrey campaign. I was at the Wilmington Hotel when I was 13 years old in '68. It was a great experience. But so that vein was always there. And I think the parents contributed to that. How you get involved or whatever, it all depends. It depends on what gets you kickball. All of us in this room here, in our life experience, is there something that kicks you, that says, hey, I'm going to ask the question. I want to look behind the people. That's an old term, I'm sure you do. I want to look behind the curtain. And so I started doing a lot of that. And one of the things that by getting involved, at least, I went on a program called Close Up when I was in high school. Went to Washington, D.C., learned a few things, got involved in student council, but then starting to get involved on all kinds of issues, all the way into student council, issues of why is the government going? Why not? And a lot of it has to do, we've got also the times. The times make a difference. Water
Vietnam. It was all over the newspaper. Where, and I don't want to, more of an intro, is that there are some areas that government, institutions, both public and private, have an impact on people's lives. And the way that and how you can make some change or make a difference is up at the Capitol up there, you know, that you have a great view here. Why this university is here, and why, rather than not keep the two halls of St. John's Hospital and this big place here, is because the government said, hey, it's important. Yeah, your metro state is, what is it? Something within walls? Or what is it? What's the catchphrase?
A university without walls.
University without walls, but it has walls. You've got to have at least some walls. So that's basically went to Hamline University, poli-sci, sociology degree, double major. You just use what liberal arts is at that time. Try and just get a better understanding of what's going on.
Thank you. Before we go on, I want to introduce our fourth panelist, Representative Rena Moran. She's in her first term in the House of Representatives, representing District 65A, which covers a portion of St. Paul, correct? It's west of here. She currently serves on the Education Reform, Health and Human Services Reform, Public Safety, and Crime Prevention, Policy, and Finances Committees. So, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Basically, at this point, we're just going through each of our panelists, how you got involved in the political process. The focus this evening is lobbying, citizen lobbying, how we can affect change as citizens, not professional lobbyists, up at the Capitol. And just one technical footnote that we need to make. If you could use the microphone, because we're recording this evening, and we may not be able to pick up the audio unless we use the microphone. So if you could do that, that'd be great. Thank you. We'll go on to Representative Moore.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you all for inviting me here. I'm sorry, I have students doing an Occupy Wall Street project this semester, and they just kept asking me questions. They kept saying, I gotta get on the road, I gotta get on the road. So I apologize for making you all wait. I'm here because of a tornado in Jesse Ventura. That's how I became a citizen lobbyist and legislator. We lived in St. Peter. I had been a lawyer, and I quit being a lawyer because I wanted to go into teaching, and that's how I ended up at Gustavus. Came from California, through Chicago to Minnesota. The tornado hit in St. Peter. We came out of our basement, and it was raining in our living room because much of the roof had been damaged. And what we saw, my wife and I, was how Minnesotans help each other. How Minnesotans come forward in a time of crisis. People we didn't even know. A whole school of kids came and picked up my neighbor's garage that was in my backyard and carried it out to the street so it could be demolished and taken away. So my wife and I started doing a lot of volunteering in St. Peter to pay back the community that had helped us. My wife led a playground building project that the community in the high school built in one weekend to replace the playground that had been in St. Peter. And part of that was that we made clay tiles, and people put their hands in the clay tile and then put it up in the playground. But you paid for the opportunity to have your handprint up. We had Paul Wellstone put a handprint up. We had Artie Carlson's handprint. And we were going to get Jesse Ventura's handprint one day when he came to St. Peter. But I had a question for Jesse Ventura when he was governor. How are you going to pay for education with your takeover of education funding? And so Martha said, you can ask him that question, but first I get the handprint, because if you ask him the question first, it's going to be a fist in that play and not a hand. So Martha got it, and she scooped out of the store, and we're right there on 169 in St. Peter. And I said, Governor, I don't understand your long-term plan for paying for K-12 education. You've got a surplus now, but you may not have a surplus in the future. And he was fine. He answered my question. That's all I could ask. But I walked away, and one of his aides used foul language asking why I thought I was allowed to ask a question during a handshaking tour. And, I grew up as a kid thinking, rightly or wrongly, that government's for the people. I should be allowed to ask a question. I didn't have any credentials. This concerned me. I was a little kid. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I was so mad and so offended I filed to run for school board. I thought, I'm going to get involved. And I had no plan. This wasn't something I thought of growing up as a kid. This is not something I thought about going to school, but I just had a passion for education. And if I was going to be treated this way, I was going to stand up for my kids and most of the kids I was going to run. So I was on the school board for 5 years. And became increasingly frustrated that we had to keep doing referendums to pay for education. And in St. Peter, we have very relatively little taxable property because we run the sex offender program in Minnesota. Along with Moose Lake, that property is not taxable. And Gustavus doesn't pay property tax either. So when we did a referendum, it fell on the houses, on the retired folks. And I was very angry that we had to keep upping our property taxes in order to pay for education at Side Road State House. Again, no plan, but just the circumstances and the passion. I tell my students, anyone can be an advocate, anyone can do my job, really. Just the desire, the willingness, and the determination, not to make myself sound great. I just think there are qualities that everyone has. And the question is, how do we determine our passion? How do we determine what we want to work for? And I'll be interested to hear what the other panelists think. Rich is there all the time, and I mean that in a good way. The doors are open, the phones work, email works, and I think we all make a dedicated effort to try to respond and listen and work with citizen lobbyists. So I'll cut it short there because I know we'll have time to ask, hear questions, and hear from others. So thank you.
Good evening. How are you doing? Thank you so much for coming out this evening. And please, I apologize for being late. So my name is Rena Coran. I represent District 65A in St. Paul. That's the Rondo, Frogtown, North End, Mount Airy, and Capitol Heights neighborhood. I've lived in that community, or been involved in that community around 11 years. And I really got involved and decided to run just because I kept coming across, this isn't fair. This isn't fair. I'm a mother of 7, so my kids have all gone through the public school system. And I was raised at a time where we were a community. You know, you connected to the community, we all were responsible for each other. It's just the way it was. And so when I moved to St. Paul, I had that disconnection from a community. It was really important for me to, try to connect with the community that I was living in. And I just started off by just knocking on doors and speaking to my neighbors and learning who they were and what they did. I just thought it was important. As a mother of 7, who wants to be the only one raising their kids? Not for their kids. I didn't. So that part for me was really, really important. And, I joined up a local church, which really allowed me to become really connected to the community, because what I found is that many of the people who were a part of my church lived in the community. And St. Paul is like a generation of families who have been there forever. And what I began to find out was the history of the Rondo community. So if anyone doesn't know anything about the Rondo community, the Rondo community is a historical Black community. And in the late 50s, early 60s, when they decided to build 94, it came right through the Black community and displaced a huge amount of families. And when I moved there in 2001, began to get to know my neighbors, and I would ask people, who they were, how long they lived in the community. I constantly heard about the Rondo community in 1994 and the displacement of family, and heard people who were really angry, who were really upset about the displacement. And my thought was, wow, this is 2000. When did this happen? And it was like the late 50s and early 60s. I'm like, are you guys still mad? It was like, yeah, they were still mad and still angry, because what happens so often is that people make plans for your community, and they don't engage you in that planning process. And for me, what I really heard in that whole process of deciding to make the Rondo community, Surrey Hill community, my home,